Good afternoon, folks. My name is Mike. First of all, I would, really like to thank Workers' World Party and Greg in particular for the invitation to this very important event, and I'm glad that everybody is here. I'm glad to listen to the things that folks were talking about in terms of not only preserving but really advancing the legacy of Marx and Marxism both here and around the world. So, well, first off, I'm Mike, as Greg mentioned, from BAYAN-USA. We are the overseas representatives of BAYAN in the Philippines. With, BAYAN in the Philippines has more than 1,000 member organizations and about a couple million members throughout the Philippines. And we are the legal, above-ground democratic expression of the National Democratic Revolution. Being part of BAYAN, we understand, however, that the legal above-ground expression of this revolution is only secondary to the highest form of struggle that we see, that Larry was actually kind of talking about, which is the armed struggle led by the Communist Party of the Philippines through the New People's Army and the National Democratic Front. I've been tasked to create to prepare something regarding the revolution in the Philippines and its relevance to the world. And I hope to share that with you today. Regarding the status of Marxism in the Philippine Revolution, what I had mentioned, the CPP, the Communist Party of the Philippines, as of now, as of 2018, has built red political power in 73 out of 81 provinces, with more than 10,000 high-powered rifles, tens of thousands of people's militia, trained, of course, by the full-time Red Fighters, and more than 200,000 of people's self-defense units as of the 2015 party statement of the Communist Party of the Philippines. So it really is taking to heart Marx's call for revolution and, of course, applying it creatively to the conditions in the Philippines. The CPP uses Marxism, Leninism, Maoism to guide the People's Democratic Revolution through People's War, with the help of the underground National Democratic Front, which is an alliance of underground organizations, and its armed wing of full-time Red Fighters in the New People's Army. This has been going on for about 49 years. This year, on December 26th, the CPP will celebrate its 50th anniversary. And its continued growth, despite many setbacks, despite many twists and turns on the road of revolution, its continued growth and its continued relevance, and really the masses continuing to defend it, the masses in their millions continuing to defend it under two dictatorships now, under its second martial law with President Duterte. This is the result and proof of the liveliness and continued significance of Marxism to the Philippine Revolution. Marxism in the Philippines came about not too long ago, not as long ago as in many other countries in the world. And this is because the Philippines had been one of the many countries that was stunted, whose development was stunted, political and economic development was stunted by US imperialism. In the late 1800s, the US made a mad grab for countries like Puerto Rico, like Cuba, colonized Hawaii and turned it into a state, and included the Philippines in this list of its first real imperialist adventure. And of course, since the 1890s, the United States has only grown into a larger and more terrible monster. However, because of the inherent crises of capitalism, the US and all its allies continuously fold upon themselves and continuously fall all over themselves in their mad grab for power. Aiding this decay of imperialism is the growth of revolutionary movements that some comrades have already mentioned, especially national liberation struggles against imperialism, that use Marxism as a framework for our liberation. In the Philippines, after the original bourgeois democratic revolution against Spain, which was successful and created the first republic in all of Asia, there came a period of struggle where these revolutionaries were grappling with the thought of, can liberal democracy in this new age of imperialism, led by US imperialism, really take us beyond where we need to go? Can it really liberate our people? Well, after 1917, with the success of the Bolshevik Revolution led by Comrade Lenin, Marxist work started coming into the Philippines, right? And by the 10s and 20s, all these smaller trade unions and peasant associations began gathering up, began uniting, and formed two big parties. One was the Socialist Party of the Philippines, and one was the Old Communist Party. In 1930, they finally decided to join hands. They said, you know, right, what the hell, right? Let's unite against US imperialism. And they did so. And this was the first, this was the old merger party, or the PKP, that many revolutionaries who are alive, who are still alive today, came out of. Revolutionary figures like Jose Maria Sison were members of the PKP. Indeed, some of this, quite a bit of this preparation here is drawn from that. Drawn from Joma's writings as well as the writings of the CPP. But after a certain period, with many twists and turns on the road, the young proletarian revolutionaries of the 1960s who were opening their eyes to what was going on in the world, especially with the Cultural Revolution in China, all the changes, all the advances made by the Soviet Union, the Vietnamese People's War for Liberation, and the rise of revolutionary movements in the United States led by organizations like the Black Panther Party, like the Young Lords, right? Like the Brown Berets, like Yi War-kwon, right? And many comrades, many esteemed comrades here who were able to take part in these struggles, Joma, as we call him, and his contemporaries, his fellow youth activists, decided at some point to create a party of a new type. And they drafted up several studies. They went and integrated with workers and peasants around the Philippines, and they realized a change needed to happen. Because the old merger party had actually slowed down a little bit. The influence of Marxism, as strong as it was being tainted by this new thing, revisionism, reformism that Larry had talked about earlier. And the old merger party actually swung left and right. They would go to ultra-left errors of insurrection with like a few dozen people. And of course, when they got jailed, they would be wondering what's going on? Why are we getting jailed? Or they would go and swing to the right with reformism. So Jose Maria Sison and others took it upon themselves to reestablish the Communist Party of the Philippines under the guidance of Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought on December 26, 1968, the 75th birthday of Mao Zedong. In a few months, they launched the People's War, originally with 35 people, 60 people and about 35 firearms. I think 35 to more than 10,000 is a pretty good, is a pretty good record. Let's see. One of the principal Marxist tools that these proletarian revolutionaries used over the decades and continue to use is the rectification movement, the idea of the rectification movement that was learned from the great communist Mao. It is a Marxist-Leninist tool to continuously reinvigorate the party and continuously strengthen the party by inviting more and more youth. Indeed, the revolutionary movement and the above-ground legal mass movement today in the Philippines continuously strives to have at least 1/3 youth, 1/3 middle-aged comrades, and 1/3 of those who are advanced in struggle and advanced in knowledge and advanced in age. Thank you. I wasn't sure how that would fit into this. And we see this reflected not only in the Philippines, but all over the world, with what Sarah mentioned, 40% of people here in the United States being interested in seeing a socialist country rather than a capitalist one. A lot of this is with the youth. And so that is definitely something to applaud, right? This is a new and exciting era. But of course, in the Philippines, the National Democratic Revolution is not just about the CPP, but in the current stage of the revolution, there is a strong promotion of Marxist teachings, a sort of return, but a better return, a return more like what John was talking about, a return based on what Lenin taught us. The heart and soul of Marxism, as Lenin taught us, is the concrete analysis of concrete conditions. Not whatever we think Marx meant, or not whatever we thought Engels wanted to happen, but a real creative application of Marxism to our present conditions. For the National Democratic Revolution, this includes overseas Filipinos, migrant Filipinos like myself, and how we can link up, especially in this new era that is becoming more international, more multinational, how we can link up with folks overseas in what we call the host countries, how we can really take part in these worker struggles together with our comrades overseas. The continued relevance of Marxism, not only in the Philippines, but in the third world generally, and the strides that communist parties engaged in armed struggle in India and Turkey and the Philippines, is because in our countries, literally where I grew up in the countryside, there are still places where people are whipped for not following the dictates of their landlords. There are still places where women and children are being exchanged for favors, quote unquote, to these landlords, when you cannot, as a peasant worker, when you cannot provide the amount of fruit or rice, usually, that they demand. There are still places where the landlord's horse needs to go before an entire peasant family on a road. Otherwise, you could get shot, or you could get some other form of repression. And it's because of that Marxism is still so powerful and so relevant. We see it not only in the oppressed nations outside of the United States, but in the oppressed peoples within the United States and within the so-called first world countries. Black and brown people do not have the same democratic rights as the so-called white majority. Well, in a few years, as Sarah mentioned, the working class is going to be majority black and brown, and the white supremacists have a lot to watch out for. I'm going to go ahead and wrap up in a little bit, but I just wanted to touch upon what we do here as overseas representatives of the AND movement. Of course, 50% of our struggle is to gain support for the National Democratic Revolution in the Philippines. And we ask this mainly through doing shared discussions, through asking comrades to come out to our campaigns, especially our local campaigns in the working class migrant Filipino community, but also through inviting comrades, many of whom have gone to the Philippines to take part in the people's movement there for liberation, really engage in what we call exposure trips or integration trips. Now, this is something that we'll continuously do until our victory, right? The other thing that we do, the other 50%, is us extending support and solidarity to different organizations, particularly strong Marxist-Leninist-minded comrades, like obviously the comrades in the Workers' World Party and others, and really engage together in anti-police brutality struggles, in strikes like what's happening in the new school. I'm actually pretty glad to, because we have a comrade at least who's out there right now reading a statement for us as we speak, and really showing support to the struggles here in the belly of the beast. Only through our united struggle can we really overthrow imperialism. It happened before in the 1960s and 70s when people in the imperialist centers agitated against US war in Vietnam. while the People's War in Vietnam was going on. And it can happen today while there are multiple armed struggles going on in the world, struggles for liberation going on in the world. It can happen with the unity of the multinational working class here. One thing, a lot of folks, especially younger people, ask how much longer will the revolution take? Not how much longer this portion will take, but how much longer the revolution will take. In 2015, I and a couple comrades from within our lifetime, the Palestine Solidarity Organization, were able to go to the Philippines. It was easy for me because, well, I grew up there, but for them, it was an interesting experience. And we were fortunate enough to sit down for a discussion at the office of the National Democratic Front of the Philippines. That happened to be with a couple of the founders, Comrade Louis Halandoni, who used to be a priest and joined the armed struggle, and Comrade Connie Ledesma, who was one of the founders of the first revolutionary armed women's organization in the Philippines, Makibaka. And somebody asked this exact question: how much longer is the revolution going to take? When are we going to win? Well, they both looked at each other and kind of laughed. And Comrade or Ka Louis responded saying, you know, when we were your age, in their 20s and early 30s, they said, you know, when we were your age, we were thinking the same thing. We were thinking, 5 to 10 years at most. But one thing that we realized over generations of struggle that we hope to pass to you is that, and I hope to share with everybody here, is that no matter how far away victory looks like, we know we're not doing this for ourselves. We must be prepared to win as soon as possible. We must be able to be militant and fight to win as soon as possible, but prepared to struggle for as long as it takes. And when this entire generation of comrades, when their time comes, a lot of us in the movement know that it is our responsibility to continue and advance the struggle until victory of socialism in the Philippines and the victory of socialism against imperialism and eventually the opening up of communism worldwide. Marx died a long time ago, but his legacy lives on in us today. It is through the class struggle that proletarian revolutionaries become immortal. This is our, not only our sort of vow, not only a threat against imperialism, but really a promise that we will win. So I want to extend this red salute to comrades over here. Remember that we have nothing to lose but our chains, but a world to win, as Marx told us.